OpenPilot community. The purpose of this video is to show how to bind a DSMX Spektrum Satellite receiver to a CC3D. As of the current firmware versions for the CC3D 1502, some users have been experiencing some issues with trying to bind the satellite while it is attached to the CC3D. In previous OpenPilot firmware versions, this process was a lot easier and a little well documented by other people online with videos and the processes to ensure a good, complete, correct bind. This video is to hopefully clear those issues that some people are having and clear any kind of misconceptions or misperceptions anybody has. To start off with this process, there's one of two ways to do this. One is to have your satellite actually directly connected to the actual Spektrum receiver and have it pre-bound to the receiver before you even start doing any kind of soldering, manipulating the wires, the input connections on the CC3D. That is the simplest, most straightforward possible way of doing this. Some users don't have a receiver, so they're unable to bind the satellite to their transmitter and get it to work correctly with the CC3D. According to the Wikipedia guides for the Spektrum and binding on the OpenPilot site, it states that you're supposed to use option 4 in order to bind if you're using a DSM2 satellite, and option 8 if you're using a DSMX based satellite. In my case, I found that option 8 does not work. It's actually option 9. So let's start back over from the beginning here. First off, it's if you're starting from scratch, in this case is what I'm doing, CC3D board completely erased, no settings on it, with the satellite directly attached to it. For this whole process, you will need some type of external power system in order to do the bind process completely. You cannot use the USB to power the CC3D to do the bind. You have to use an external source. In this case, I'm using a 10 amp ESC with a 3-cell battery to get this process done. To start off with, go ahead and get your system, your CC3D, connected to the USB on your computer, and go ahead and open up the ground control station. You want to wait for a successful connection. As you can see, I've got flashing LEDs, and it even states down here at the bottom that I have some transmit receive connections going on with the receiver. First off, we have to, in order to get the bind going, you have to go to the configuration tab and go to hardware. Set the receiver port to disabled plus 1 shot. Set your flexi port to DSM. Everything else you can leave as default. The wiki guides states that you can use either the flexi port or the main port to connect your DSMX satellite to. For the purpose of the bind, you have to use the flexi port first. Once it's been used and you've got the bind completed, you just come back over, change its value to whatever you want to be at, and then make sure the main port says DSM. That is only if you're going to actually use the main port for your satellite connection. Once you have these values set and saved, set and changed, you want to make sure you hit save. Got to see the green check mark. If there's no green check mark, that means the save didn't go through. You'll have to redo the save. Once you have these values changed, you go into System. Go to at the very top, you'll see an option that says Settings. Click on the drop down list, the arrow, come down to you see Hardware Settings, click on the drop down list for it. Underneath there, you're going to see the option for the DSMX bind. This goes back to the wiki page where it says to use option 8 if you're using DSMX. Stated earlier, 8 does not work for me. I have to use the option 9. Once I have that option changed, we got to save it to the CC3D. So you want to click on the little hard drive arrow with the hard drive with the red arrow facing up, which stands for save. Once it's saved, go ahead and disconnect the CC3D from the USB. And then go ahead and connect your CC3D to your external battery power source. Once you connect your battery to your CC3D with an external power source, you will notice that your satellite radio is now flashing with this typical bind mode LED, the flashing orange light. You'll also notice that the CC3D indicator, status indicator, is now going to a single steady flash. Once you know that your receiver is working and it's in its bind mode, then you can actually go back to your controller, your transmitter, go to the bind options, and start the bind process. Now, if your controller supports the ability to do model memory on the binds, I would highly use it. This process can be a little tedious, especially if you're out in the field and you're flying and you want to change models. You have to go through the whole rebind process all over again, grabbing a computer and everything just to get this to work. So as you can still see in the background, my satellite receiver is still flashing. I will hit to go ahead and select bind.
Binding. DSMX 22 milliseconds. Bind complete.
All right. Now my transmitter is now bound to the satellite receiver. Now, once that has been done, go ahead and turn off the power on your transmitter. Disconnect your power source from the CC3D, and then reconnect your USB back to the CC3D. Once your CC3D has been booted up correctly and your computer connects to it, you have to go back to the System tab under Hardware Settings and change the DSMX option, the DSMX bind option from a 9 to a 0. The 9 may not be specifically for your type setup. You may have a DSM2, so your number may be a little different. What the key point about this change is making sure that this goes back to a 0. If you do not set that back to a 0 and save it to the CC3D and you disconnect power and reconnect power, it will put it back into a bind mode. We don't want that, especially when we're in the field, don't have access to an actual computer to change this. Now, that's been changed to a 0. I can go ahead and go back to the actual welcome screen, and then we can start our vehicle setup wizard.